I would indicate as a priority for the short term to start a reconciliation between the market and the social in Europe.
Thank you. And could you pick up on the question that was directed specifically at you about relaunching the single market, yes, and whether it's a marketing exercise?
I don't think it's a marketing exercise, although also a marketing aspect to the exercise will be needed. But to pick up more precisely the point you made, I think that there will have to be some extrapolation. You did not use this term, but in the sense of building the single market where it isn't yet quite there, like services, like digital. But also, I agree with you, some innovations in methods. For example, I hear more and more the point that you make, that in a community of 27, if we proceed by directives rather than regulation, we do pay lip service to subsidiarity, but we also create a mess. Maybe in some cases, some regulations may finally be more helpful than a patchwork of directives.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Regarding industrial policy, of course, I think that in the energy sector, for example, it's going to be very hard to have European champions because we don't have private companies in most of the member states. So if we move toward a more privatized energy sector in Europe, that could be a first step to get more integrated European companies. That, of course, will be very good for the whole European economy. When I mean by industrial policy, there used to be a Spanish politician a few years ago that used to say the best industrial policy is the one that doesn't exist. And we completely disagree with this policy. We need industrial policy in the sense not of protectionism, and as I said before, but in the sense of pushing the private sector, the market, in those areas where the private sector or the market cannot run or at least start up by itself. For example, a good example will be the electrical vehicle. Electrical vehicle will be a success and a great success for Europe if there is a push from the public sector, from the government side. And of course, if we act together, all the countries in Europe, with the private sector in launching this project, in harmonizing both infrastructure and the technology of charging the batteries and so on. So when I talk about electrical vehicle, it's something more than a car, because electrical vehicle means a big jump in renewable energy. The big advantage of electrical vehicle will be that will make the electrical system more manageable for the renewable to jump in all over Europe. Electrical vehicle is also a technological opportunity for the ICT, because we are going to be able to get all the advantages of the electrical vehicle if we develop the smart meters and the smart grids, and this is going to act, of course, as a trigger for the ICT industry, in which Europe has a leadership, and we have the opportunity to keep that leadership for the next decades. And of course, the electrical vehicle is a very good opportunity to face our challenges regarding carbon emissions without hurting the industry. We always put in Spain the example of if we had all cars in Spain being electrical, it will be the equivalent in terms of CO2 emissions, carbon emissions, to having 4.5 billion trees in Spain. Of course, Spain will never have 4 billion trees because they don't fit. But we can have the equivalent in terms of carbon emissions if we had all our cars being electrical, pure electrical driven. Of course, this is an utopia, but this is utopia that we have to work, because in this utopia, there is also a future for the industry, employment and income in Europe.
Thank you very much indeed. Gerard?
No, 5 priorities. I mean, it's the 5 dimensions of our visioning paper. If you want one,
I do.
I'll say to you, education. It's very simple. There was a clear study that shows the relation between the PISA results and economic growth. And it all starts with education. And whether it's primary, secondary, and scientific, it all hangs together. For education. And yes, we use here the word should. When we do in our industries a vision and a strategy, we avoid the word should. We say we will, because that's something we have in our own hands. And as industry, we say we will continue to invest in the education of our people and in the training. We will continue to invest in R&D and in the strength of our bases in Europe. But to Europe, we only can appeal. As global multinationals with our roots and our hearts in Europe, we only can appeal and say, we see a good future for Europe if we can do these kind of things, and therefore we should. But that's reaching out to others. There, I cannot say we will. That is something we have to do together with a lot of other stakeholders.
Thank you very much indeed. And last but not least, Leif.
Well, I think I too would have picked education given that question. But let me make another point here. We are actually presenting 50 recommendations here. They're not the type of recommendations that way one would have to be forced to make very strong financial priorities. You know, we are not talking about expensive programs here that would turn deficits into higher things, etc. So I would make the point that many of the recommendations on the 50, even though you can, from a media point of view, might be good to single out 1 or 2, in reality they actually represent quite a wide array of different activities that we could well do, and they are not contradictory to each other. So I think sometimes I resent this feeling that you select 1 or 2 things and get that done. If we did that in our companies, then we would fail. We are trying to be good at quite a lot of different things. We need to be good in manufacturing, we need to be good in economy, we need to be good in finance, and by the way, you need to be good marketing people also. You cannot only say we should only do manufacturing. Then on the other side here, I think, is this mix of a market or mix. I know there's a big debate in many countries here. How much can we rely on the market? I think we as ERT must make the point that we certainly think that the best way to deliver goods and services over a very wide range of needs is with competition and with many people having the opportunity to offer those services. And I think we perhaps, rather than debating that, should take a look at what could we as European political system, how could we actually become very competent and sophisticated buyers of services in a competitive world, rather than saying we absolutely need to do this in the public sector or we need to do this in the public sector. And rather look at how can we hone and really tune in on how can we be really good, competent, sophisticated examples of how to buy services off of a small-scale market. Because we do, as ERT, we do believe in small-scale markets and large-scale markets to be the best supplier of reasonable services and good quality services and good quality products at reasonable prices.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much to all of you. We have come to the end of our time, but I think we've had a very lively and stimulating debate. I was reminded when you said earlier, courage is not a good word to use about such debates. When I asked you about the bold word that repeats again and again, I was reminded of a British comedy series called Yes Minister, where a new minister wants to make an impact, and he says, I've come up with a bold idea. He explains his idea, and the civil servant says, that would be very courageous, Minister. To which he replies, oh dear, would it? Let's not do it. So what is very clear, though, is that a far-sighted, let's call it far-sighted, approach is needed, and that we need more of what the first George Bush called the vision thing. The ERT has provided a vision. I think there was general agreement that you're on the right track, but there's a great deal of work to be done. But I'd like to thank you very much indeed. Particularly, I know, Mr. Monti, you have to leave, and I believe, Minister, you also have to go. I am going to hand back to Leif in a moment just to say a few closing words and give you a bit more information. But before we do that, could I just ask for a big round of applause? Thank you so much.